Have you ever asked a question that made just everything better? I know that I have, but I have to say, unfortunately, the ones I remember most are the questions that I never asked. One in particular that is stuck in my memory actually cost me more than 2,000 hours of my time and more than $100,000 in revenue. It was brutal. A few years ago, I built a platform that I just knew people needed. And I was right, people needed it, but I didn't yet understand that to earn the right to give people what they need, you absolutely must go through the door of what they want. I never asked that simple question. And so I failed hard. Have you ever had a similar experience? I hope not. But if you have, man, I commiserate with you. I relate with you and I got you. Sure, there's some benefit that comes out of those. And we learn, we move forward. This is how we get better. I learned a ton and I used the training that we created for that platform today, some of it, in fact, for this very episode. But it hurt. And now I know that that one unasked question that you leave out there, it can cost more than any wrong answer likely ever will. Hello, and welcome to Calm and Clarity Conversations, where we firmly believe that people matter most, and calm, clarity, and focus, in that order, are the only path to true momentum. Curiosity leads to clarity. And today I'm going to share with you the question that I should have asked years ago and three more that can change any decision that you make. Basically, I'm going to give you the support that I wish I'd had then and allow you to be able to be in a position to make conscious, clear choices rather than having to be reactive and picking up the pieces on the back end. To set the stage, it's important for me to say this. I believe that curiosity, asking more and better questions, is the number one skill in the world, and it's not close. If you asked me, and I believe someone did in an interview quite some time ago, what is one skill that you would give everyone in the world and know that the world would change? It is this. It is curiosity. It leads to empathy. It leads to so many other things. Curiosity is a core. Now, if you think of a skill set, a group of skills, leadership is that keystone skill set. But as far as individual skills are concerned, nothing's going to move you further faster than being more curious. And when I train communication for clients, I use a simple framework to think about that communication. Listen, ask, act, and grow. Listen to understand. We all know most people don't, right? We listen with the intent to respond rather than understand most of the time. If you could take that urgency to respond out and replace it with a sincere desire to understand, you'll listen much better. Then ask until you do understand. Ask questions until you get it, until you understand the different perspectives, you feel and see the different parts, and you have the knowledge you need to take that third step and act upon that understanding. And then finally, when we talk about grow, it's about growing through feedback. Not really the topic of our conversation today, but it is important and a good underlined piece for you to ensure that you have quality feedback in your life. Much like calm comes first in our optimization equation of life, listening both comes first in any successful communication path, and it's also the direct lead in to sincere curiosity. Why is that? It's because humans crave connection. We want to feel heard. In fact, I frequently will say that we all want two things in life. We want connection and we want movement. Curiosity leads to both. We crave connection. We want to know that when we're with somebody else that they care about what we think and what we say, that they are considering our opinion, our thought, our belief, what matters to us, that they're seeing things from our perspective. And when we are heard, the relationship begins. It begins to build trust. And trust is the foundation. Without that, curiosity can feel incredibly intrusive. It can feel truly like an interrogation or badgering or a jackhammer, none of which is good. And I'm sure as I said those words, you didn't feel great thinking about doing that to someone or having that done to you. When we know that trust is the foundation, and we build some of that, we earn that space, No matter how quickly we do it, we gain the right to be able to ask questions and to get real answers because it comes from a good place. A simple example for me, when I worked in airports some years ago, I would tell my team to sincerely ask about the guest and what was going on with them, to open the door, to let curiosity be not about an interrogation, but about an invitation. What did that look like? Well, when we were speaking with somebody, they'd come in, they'd be in a rush, they would be trying to grab their item. If it was a convenience store, they'd be trying to do it quickly. If it was a jewelry store, maybe they were shopping around. Either way, people had the same thought. I'm trying to get where I'm going, I'm trying to do the task that I have. And we found that if we just took care of them and we didn't say anything at all, that it didn't lead anyplace. It felt a little bit awkward. We found that if we asked them a forced question, one that we were told that we had to ask, but we weren't sincere about, that it actually pushed people away. But if we asked a question that was based in real curiosity, something as simple as, are you traveling for business and pleasure? Or are you able to head somewhere fun this week? Or how are things going with your process through the airport? And then we listened to the answer, that single question changed the tone of the entire relationship. In fact, I saw a number of times where that sparked something that became an ongoing relationship with people who would come through the airport and even went beyond that. It is remarkable how the single right question changes everything. Now, once we know as humans that someone is truly listening, what you'll find is that you tend to relax a little bit. Think of yourself when you know that someone is listening to you, they want to hear what you have to say. They're curious about it. They're looking forward to it. Don't you relax a little bit? Aren't you a little more open to questions? That said, how those questions are asked matters. Someone relaxes, and then you ask a question that sounds like a newspaper reporter on a deadline, doesn't work terribly well. Sounds like someone at a prison intake interview, doesn't work terribly well. But if you ask it as a concerned friend, you ask it as someone who is fascinated by them because you are, you get a great response. Questions without listening are like fishing without bait. We are, when we ask questions, looking to increase engagement, looking to move down the funnel of deeper connection. We're not throwing them out there with nothing on the line and no interest in catching anything. We're not just there to sit in the boat. We're there to, of course, get that connection. And maybe in this case, I suppose the example stretches a little far as we say, catch that fish. Active listening makes people feel safe enough to share real answers. And real answers are what we're after. How do you get to real answers? Not only are you curious and do you listen, but you listen for words, pauses, listen for what's unsaid, listen for that thing that is behind what they said. I'm sure you do that as well, right? You get asked a question, you give a simple answer, but behind it, there's something there that you would like to share. Listen for that, look for it. And know this, if you're not listening, you're not curious, you're just wanting to talk. Or maybe you're just wanting to go away. Neither of those is fantastic. Think of an easy way to get into a conversation. It's some version of tell me your story. If you are looking at someone and you're thinking, I want to know more, it almost certainly has to do with their story. And it can be tell me a story, tell me your story, tell me whatever it might be. For me, the way that showed up is I made a commitment several years ago to meeting new people, to engaging, to building new relationships. And I decided, since people matter most and relationships are everything was my number one core value in the world, I would spend 5 to 10 hours a week meeting at least 5 new people a week and learning their story. It was a very daunting task at first, but over time it became a mission integral to who I was and who I would become. And I was fortunate to have over 1,200 of those conversations. The majority of them, when we would get on the call, I would start to get to know them a little bit. And then I would just say, tell me your story. And sometimes they look at me a little suspiciously. Sometimes they weren't quite sure because most people don't ask you that. But when I reassured them that this indeed was something that I cared about, they would tell me their story. And to that end, I found the most incredible people that I've ever met in my life. And I'm fortunate to be connected to many of them to this day. I was able, through our Old Dreams Are Real podcast, which you're still welcome to go and find, it is out there on all your platforms, to be able to share many of those stories with the world. But it all began by asking that question. Tell me your story. How can I learn if I don't know you and I want to know you? You see, when we learn to use the pattern of listen, ask, and act, listen to understand, ask until you do. That's the bulk of the time. And then we take action. The impact of our communication is immensely improved as opposed to what most of us do, which is just start acting. If we even maybe listened a little, so today I'm going to give you a condensed version of the ask part. I'm going to give you 4 questions that you can start using right away. And I'm going to remind you that they only work if you really hear the answers. When you think of this framework, think of it as how do I orient? How do I get my head around what direction I'm facing? What can I get revealed that I might not see? Where is there this challenge if I want to challenge my belief in what I heard? And how do I commit to an action? First is to orient. Here's the question. What is one thing that if I do that thing, it will make the others that I am considering either easier or go away? This is super useful if you are facing a number of questions or decisions in your life or actions that you could take and they all feel urgent and important. It's a good way to clear the deck, to cut through the noise, to find the signal. And for me, I've had this is a very frequent occurrence, but I've had a lot of coaching clients who, when I meet them, are drowning in tasks. I remember one in particular. She said to me, "Look, Dan, I'm writing a book. I'm running a workshop next week. I have these other 2 clients that I just met that I have to onboard. I have marketing to be able to do." And as she was ramping, I could hear the anxiety. I could hear the stress in her voice. And so I just paused and I asked her, okay, of all those things, they're all important, they're all urgent, I got it. Which one of them, if you took care of it right now, would make the others either easier or go away? And what she recognized in that moment was that she could deflect most of them, but this workshop she was running the next week, which her new clients were involved in, and the book was coming after, that if she took care of simply getting the plan done for that and everything delegated, that it would clear the deck of a lot of other issues and give her room to breathe. That space of simply asking, what is one thing if I do that thing, others will be easier or go away, allows you to orient, allows you to be directionally solid. Secondly, when we think about revealing, ask, what would I want to know if I were the person receiving this? As a note, this is the one that I missed several years ago. I know what people needed, or I knew what people needed. I knew that they needed training about communication and sales and leadership and time effectiveness and strategic thinking, what I call the foundations of success. But I did not bother, or really I wasn't aware enough to ask, what is it that they wanted? What delivery method would they be excited about? What would make them go, ooh, I know that I have to go there and I'm glad to pay for it. Had I asked that, I may well have developed much of the same training, but in a different format and found a path to success with that training a lot earlier. It was a painful lesson for me, but one that I'll never forget and that has opened more doors. When you ask, what would I want to know if I were the person receiving this? It opens blind spots. And it gives you an opportunity to mirror their answer, to consolidate, what if I invert and see from their lens, what would I really want to know? What would be important to me? That inversion of considering from other people's perspective can change your direction and can save you from an immense amount of grief, maybe even thousands of hours or hundreds of thousands of dollars. The third question that I'll give you today is around the challenging concept. And that is, if I had to decide in the next 60 seconds, what would I choose and why? This gets to the spot that our experience, our gut, our understanding is often better than we give it credit for. I follow this principle where if my gut says no, meaning the thing that I wouldn't want, I will always listen to it because it's going to be right 99% of the time. If my gut says yes, meaning the thing that I would want, that I would be tempted to rationalize, then I'll validate it. In this case, you're taking and amplifying that to cut through, again, a different type of noise to give you some urgency and to force clarity. And ask yourself, if I had to decide right now in the next 60 seconds and I had no other choice, it must be done, what would I choose and why? In my experience, 85% of the time, you'll make the right decision right then, and you'll get through that procrastination or that analysis paralysis or whatever it may be. And a little bit like flipping a coin, if you get to a spot in your life where you're flipping a coin and you flip it in the air and you think heads or tails, and you say, if it lands on heads, I'll do this, and it lands on tails, I'll do this, and it lands, and you look and in your gut it says, oh no, that's the wrong answer, then you probably found the answer was the other one. Either way, this is just a quick path to clarity. The fourth question is, it's really about acting, right? It's about that final step of listen, ask, act. How do I do something once I have learned, once I am there? Now it's about asking, what is one extremely small action I can take in the next 5 minutes that moves this forward? This lets you move from insight to action, and it overcomes the momentum of zero. I will swear by the fact that the most difficult momentum in the world to overcome is the momentum of zero. So what lets you move from insight to action? It's not a big action. Usually it's not a big decision. It's once you know where you're going, it now becomes about, how do I find the single smallest action, the thing that I can do quickly? Maybe it's signing a paper, sending an email, finishing a note, whatever it is, something small, because once you do that, momentum will start to build on your side and your flywheel will start to turn. The right question at the right time changes everything. If there's anything you take from those 4 questions, take that, use those as a bit of a question toolkit as you go into this week. Why does it work? And how can you ask so that it does work? Right? Because 4 questions, they're helpful, they're insightful, but you have to understand a little bit of how to get them to work. You can ask them wrong and people want to smack you in the head. You can ask them right and they'll want to hug you and be connected to you for a very long time. There's a big difference between them. And I'll give you 3 ways rather, that you can ask so that it works better. First, ask deeper. What does that mean? It means literally ask more, be more curious, dig deeper. Why? Because most truth is 5 to 6 layers down, but most people stop at 2. A simple example for you is when you meet somebody and you, let's say it's somebody that you know, and you connect with them maybe for the first time all day and you say, how are you doing? They say, oh, I'm fine. Great. And what happened? What's going on? Oh, it's all good. Well, you're already 2 levels in. You haven't learned anything. Does this sound familiar to anybody? Then you say, oh, okay, it's all good. What's something that happened today? Well, actually, it was kind of a tough day. Wait a minute, that's different than what we got before. We're finally 3 levels in. Oh, it was a tough day. Really? What happened? Oh, it's no big deal. So now we're 4 levels deep. No, really, I care. What happened? Well, 3 people died and I got fired from my job and my car broke down. Wait a minute, hold on. That's a lot different than the truth in theory, the quote unquote truth that we heard at the top of that conversation. The real truth is typically 5 to 6 layers deep. Most people stop at 2. We stay surface level. We nod in the parking lot to each other. Hey, what's up? Have a good day. How you doing? Fine. Good. Have a good day. And we leave it there. We don't tend to get to the real answers. When you ask deeper, you will get to deeper truths and you will build greater connection and trust. Second, ask different. Avoid predictable surface level questions. Some of them you need to use as a gateway to the deeper questions. Some of them you can look and say, I don't want to ask that. It feels plastic. It doesn't feel right. It doesn't match who I am or who I want to be or how I want to show up. So the solution there is to prepare at least one non-obvious question before important conversations. I love it when I was reading about how Tim Ferriss what prepares for interviews. He will go and look at all the different things that everybody's been asked. And I'm not encouraging you to do that and spend hours and hours preparing unless it's a crucial interview or a crucial conversation. But he'll go and look at all of them. And then he will look to come up with a question that they've never been asked before so that he can create that beautiful moment and that connection where they have to think and respond differently. I encourage you to look at the conversations in your life and consider what's a non obvious question that will take us down a path that is beautiful and grows together, and ask that, especially before important conversations. Number three, ask better. So we've asked deeper, asked different, now ask better. Be specific, be open ended, be tactful. Think about when you go to see a movie and maybe your friend went to see a movie too. You can ask this about what they thought about the movie in any of several ways. Most of us tend to lead with our opinion. Boy, that was terrible, wasn't it? That's not even a question, that's just a statement. Or did you like it? Which feels a little cornery. But how about what did you think? That's very open. So you can be open ended. You can be specific. What did you think about that movie? You can be tactful. Consider the timing and the place of where you ask. So ask deeper, ask different, ask better. And what you'll find is the why behind the what conversations are the ones that get you into deeper levels of trust and connection. They're the ones that get you out of a lot of trouble. So many of us, when we share information, we share the what. Here's what we're trying to do. Here's where we're trying to go. We often skip sharing the why, including the why of how it matters to that person. And for me, I think back to when I was leading teams, and I think back to one of the home improvement companies that I worked for early in my career. And I walked in and I said, "Hey, we've got to get to this number. And what are you going to do to get to this number?" And I didn't see connection around the room. And at that time, I was very young in my management career, so I didn't understand. What they didn't know is that the reason we had to get to that number, and the reason I had picked that number, was because it allowed us to give them a larger bonus. It allowed us to be able to do some special things in the office. And it allowed us to be able to actually expand potentially into a second office. None of them knew that. Therefore, there was no buy-in. It hit off the surface. But when we have the why behind the what conversation, when we explain the why behind what we're thinking, now that information changes the dialogue. Couple of other thoughts around questions. And I really love to have this conversation when we think about what is our strategy? How are we going to ask, and where and when and how deep are we going to go is important. But thinking about the order and the tactfulness and the timing and all of that matters as well. The comparison that I would give you and challenge you to consider is that this is a checkers versus chess issue. If you play checkers with somebody, checkers can be fun, but it doesn't tend to go deep. And with questions, if you have checkers style questions, they're predictable, they're the same, they aren't really considering timing or significant strategy, then there's a very limited number of moves, there's a very limited number of outcomes. You have the same question style, you have shallow answers. On the other hand, if you ask questions like you are playing chess, if you think 3 to 5 moves ahead, and I love chess. I never got to where I could think more than 3 to 5 moves ahead with that. I have friends that think 10, 12, 15 moves ahead. They're brilliant. They're amazing at what they do. And I love that. And the closer you can get to that in questions is wonderful. But if you're thinking 1 move ahead or 0 moves ahead, then it doesn't allow you room for adaptation. If, on the other hand, you're thinking in terms of asking questions or having conversations a little more on that chess-based piece, you're thinking, where is it that I want to end up? What is likely to lead us there? I can adapt based upon what I hear. And a good, solid example of that for me was I did all these Dreams Are Real interviews. We had over 200 episodes and met with incredible people. But what I found is that at first, I especially at first, but also maybe some of them later, that I was asking into this routine of questions. And those who had maybe heard the interviews before knew where it was going. And because of that, they were so prepared. And I remember this young man from the UK that was so prepared and had so many clean answers that we weren't getting real connection. And so I looked down at my list, and thankfully I had planned ahead. And mid conversation, I pivoted to a different question set that explored a different part of his life, that got into some of the things that he had struggled with. And he opened up, and we got into the true story. And that changed the impact of the whole episode. It actually became one of our most listened to episodes. The anchor here, the thing that I would encourage you to use as an anchor when you think about strategy, is to have strong ideas loosely held. So if you have a plan, that's great. But if the story or the circumstance or the response changes, read the new book, right? Get into a spot where you are taking a different path, but where you are remembering that because of this idea of listen, ask, and act, you're not tied down to a specific thing. When you get new information, you're able to be adaptable. And why? Because you actually care about the person. This matters. When you're thinking about all of these questions, and you're thinking about how do I ask more? How do I ask deeper? I want to take you back to this very simple 4 question series. And I want to challenge you this week to use this 4 question series to go. And I'll say them again so that you have them. If you didn't write them down earlier, you can pause them now or pause the recording now and take a moment to write these down. I want to challenge you to use this toolkit once a day for 7 days. And I encourage you to journal one change in a decision or a relationship or a clarity, effectively something that you gained from doing it each day. And if you're open to it, I'll also invite you to comment or DM or tag me if you encounter and are willing to share what happened there. I'll take a few of them if you submit them and potentially read it on a future episode. I would love to hear the difference of asking questions in a better way that it makes for your life. So here are those 4 questions again to give them to you very quickly. Number 1, the Orient question. What is one thing, if I do that, that will make everything else either easier or go away? The Reveal question. What would I want to know if I were the person receiving this information or this question? The Challenge question. If I had to decide in the next 60 seconds, what would I choose and why? Get that clarity. And then lastly, the Commit question. What is one extremely small action I can take in the next 5 minutes that will definitely move this forward? Get over that momentum of 0. Do those things. Remember, of course, that the right question at the right time changes everything. And I'd love to hear how that goes for you. Now, for me, learning to ask better questions was not something that came naturally. It was actually something I thought that I was good at. And one year in a review, my boss came to me and he said, Dan, you need to ask better questions. And I was really mad. I didn't believe him. I wasn't his biggest fan. I thought I asked very good questions, and he walked through with me this idea that we don't get to the truth until we get 5 or 6 levels deep in whatever it is. And in this case, it was me not asking managers that worked for me deep enough to get real answers. I was accepting surface answers and thinking that they were the truth and the end all, and they weren't. Now I treat question asking as a craft. I treat curiosity as the number one skill in the world because it is. And I encourage you and challenge you to do the same. Remember, one unasked question cost me a year and 6 figures, but it doesn't have to cost you anything. So be sure to listen and ask and then act. Now, as we wrap up, consider what one thing you'll do differently as a result of our time together here. And also, if you would, who else in your world needs to hear this message, needs to be encouraged to be more curious? Please share this with them and keep following the path to your true momentum. Until next week, be well, breathe well, and continue to shine brightly, my friends.